Well, hello and welcome to the last chapter that we'll be covering in criminal law here at Wade Tech. Um, we don't really complete the entire text because a lot of the crimes that are addressed later are actually handled in some of the other courses, like our drug course and our organized crime. Those are all kind of dealt with a little bit in there. So this is the last chapter in which we're going to look at a number of offenses, as the chapter title would suggest: robbery, burglary, related crimes such as trespass, and a few others. Again, like the previous one, starting with homicide, I'm going to give you some overviews of the specific laws in North Carolina. So we start with the learning objectives, and they're going to give you the general requirements for these offenses. But we'll jump in here with robbery. And robbery is one of those kind of inexact terms. Robbery is different than theft. It certainly contains a larceny, but typically robbery differs in that you are taking something from a person, from their immediate control. So there isn't a robbery of a store, it can be a robbery of a person. Robbery has many of the same elements. It's got to have the larceny. It is often done by force or threat or intimidation. North Carolina has some unique approaches to this. First of all, the standard charge of robbery in North Carolina is a common law crime. So the North Carolina General Legislature, again, has never passed a law and called it robbery. What happened instead is this kind of oral, unwritten law developed. It was defined and redefined in a number of cases. Now, the North Carolina General Legislature did, when it passed the Structured Sentencing Act, decide that it would take a number of these common law crimes, such as the manslaughter charges, and here, robbery, and define what the offense class is. Remember, in North Carolina, we start with Class A being the worst, and that would be usually pretty much exclusively first-degree murder you'd see a conviction for. Then you got B1, B2. These can be very serious charges. C, D, E, F, G, G. So you can see we're pretty far down. Now, it would again depend upon your sentencing level that you're at in North Carolina where you wind up, but it's not the worst crime you could commit. So what are the elements? Well, first of all, you have to commit a larceny. It has to be you're stealing something. So you commit a larceny or a theft, and it is from the person or from their presence. Now, person is something that obviously is touching them, is part of their what they're wearing, part of what they're holding, but even close by, something immediately under their control. That could be a robbery in North Carolina. So if I set my cell phone down in front of me while I was doing something else, and it was within easy reach, and you came up and you stole it, we'll get to the violence and intimidation, you committed a larceny, that could be from the person. Now, the third element that makes it a little different, so things like pickpocketing might not really be covered here under robbery, is you have to do it by violence or intimidation. So you can do it, I hit him in the face and I took his phone. Or I cocked back my fist and I said, I'm taking your phone. And you don't want to get punched in the nose, so you don't stop me. That would be intimidation in North Carolina. You can look at the jewelry store robbery discussion there. It's an interesting one. Robbery is forcible stealing. Force must be used, as it's said, we're going to look at, this is a general rule, in the course of the theft in order for it to be robbery. So like I said, if you just put your hand in someone's pocket, if you're a pickpocket, we're probably not a robbery here. We certainly have a larceny or taking someone else's property. But if the owner catches you, I believe I told you in a previous lecture, I was in a subway in Milan, and someone stuck their hand in my pocket to steal my wallet. And I stuck my hand in immediately, and he pulled his out and walked away. Well, he was trying to commit a robbery. He's trying to commit a larceny, okay? But he wasn't going to commit a robbery because he wasn't going to use force. Using force to escape from the owner after successful theft is in the course. So let's suppose that pickpocket got my wallet, and I saw him, and I grabbed his wrist. So in order to escape, he punched me or twisted my arm. That would be by force or violence or intimidation. Of course, using drugs or alcohol to immobilize a victim so property can be stolen is also considered force. Threat or intimidation. If force is actually used, if you actually use your physical power, then you don't need the threat or the intimidation. But sometimes the threat is enough. As I talked about earlier, things are not something you should die for or have a danger of dying for. Anything can be replaced. Now, defending another person can be a different story. So when someone threatens you with immediate bodily harm, okay, that could be a robbery because it's a threat. It's not a threat if it's a future event. If I say something like, give me your wallet now, or I'm going to come back at 5 o'clock and punch you in the nose. That would actually be the charge, and we'll look at some of these, of extortion. Now, whatever the threat is, if I come up to you and I say, give me your wallet or I'm going to punch you in the nose right now. Okay, so you have to ask, would a reasonable person be afraid or be put in fear or intimidated? So let's suppose you've got Mongo, who is 6'8" and 400 pounds and, just can bench press a gorilla. I don't know how you bench press a gorilla, but whatever. So, and little Tiffany comes up to him, and Tiffany is 4'1" and doesn't weigh 100 pounds soaking wet. So he's got 300 pounds on her, and she comes up and says, give me your wallet or I'm going to slap you. Well, it wouldn't be reasonable that he would be placed in fear. So it wouldn't be a robbery. Conversely, if he came up to her, 400 to 100 pounds, 6'8" to 4 foot nothing, and he says, give me your purse. And she's thinking, wow, he outraised me by 300 pounds. He's huge, I'm tiny, and she gives the purse, then we would have a robbery. Aggravated or armed robbery, there are different statutes, and we'll look at some in North Carolina in a little bit, where we can make the offense more serious if you are going to use a weapon, typically a gun, can be a knife, can be another object. By the way, it has to be something that I believe to be a knife or a gun. So if someone comes up behind me and they stick what I believe to be is a lead pipe, a barrel of a gun, but maybe it's a lead pipe, I don't know. And I'm not going to turn around. The guy says he's got a gun. He says, give me your wallet or I'll shoot you in the back. And I hand back the wallet and he runs away. And they catch him a week, a month, a year later. And he says, no gun. It was a pipe. And I testify, well, I believed it was a gun. That would be sufficient in North Carolina to establish armed robbery. Because it would be the competing testimony of witnesses. And the jury could believe whoever they like. So armed robbery in North Carolina, pretty serious crime. Let's look at the elements here. You commit or attempts a larceny from the person or their presence by use of a threat of firearm or other dangerous weapon. So you either have it, you use it, or you threat to use the firearm. And or it endangers or threatens the life of the person. So if I've got a gun and I just show it to you, your life is in danger, and I say, give me your wallet, and you give the wallet, that is armed robbery in North Carolina. We go all the way from a G, which is a relatively minor felony, certainly one where you could wind up serving no active time in prison, to a D, which even with a moderate prior record level in North Carolina, you're looking at multiple years in prison. So one of the things that happens under the law is the use of a firearm typically maximizes a penalty. So, for example, in bank robbery in North Carolina, we have a sentencing enhancement if you commit bank robbery with a firearm, as opposed to just a strong arm robbery. It's 60 additional months. It's 5 years tacked on your sentence. Okay, we do have one about bank robberies using automatic weapons. We do have one about carjacking. Interestingly enough, carjacking, which your book spends a little bit of time talking here, obviously is a relatively new crime. This is something that couldn't exist at the common law. I suppose you could steal a horse or a cart or a carriage. I don't know. But obviously, as the 20th century went forward, and now we're in the 21st century, we've had cars for 100 years. It's not going to be a common law offense. It would have to be one that the general legislature passed. And North Carolina, for example, does not have a specific carjacking. But carjacking is taking possession of a vehicle, a car typically, it could be a truck, that someone else has against their will. Typically, they have to be in possession. Now, that's not ownership. For example, we have in North Carolina unauthorized use of a motor-propelled vehicle. That's our joyriding statute. Okay, if I went to the parking lot where your car was now, and I simply took it and I drove it around and I brought it back, it's not a carjacking even under this model code because I didn't take it from your possession, and of course I returned it. There's no complete taking, but it would be in North Carolina unauthorized use of a motor-propelled conveyance. Okay, home invasion requires entering another's. Now, home invasion is robbery of a person in the dwelling. Typically, North Carolina, we're going to handle this with a burglary charge, usually. We don't have a specific statute for home invasion. Now, your book says home invasion is different from burglary in that the former enters when individuals are home. The reason it's different in North Carolina, where we don't use the term home invasion, is we have a burglary charge where you are home, and we'll look at those in 1 second. Purse snatching, which is basically grabbing typically a woman's purse. It is done by force, and you run away really fast. Now, that is the minimal level of force necessary. North Carolina has no specific crime of purse snatching. Okay, extortion is a threat in the future. Now, robbery, remember, is an immediate threat. Give me your wallet or I will hit you. Extortion is give me your wallet or I'm coming back tomorrow and hit you. So it's something that's going to take place in the future. Now, sometimes I'll have a student say, well, isn't that blackmail? Technically, at least in North Carolina, no. Here's the queer thing about, unusual thing about blackmail in North Carolina, is that blackmail only happens if you demand something in writing. And that, nobody is too terribly willing to write down a threat and hand it to someone and say, okay, I'm going to come back tomorrow and punch you in the throat if you don't give me your wallet. So it very well could be extortion. This is a threat of bodily harm, damage to property, to disgrace the other person, pretty much anything you could think of that would be a threat that you didn't have a right to do. So let's suppose you stole my phone, and I came up to you and I say, I want my phone back, I'm calling the police. Well, I have a right to call the police if you don't give me my phone back. If you give me my phone back, it's not extortion because you didn't have the right to that property in the first place. So extortion in North Carolina General Statute, I believe that should be 14. I think I'm in error there. 14-188-4. You threaten or communicates a threat to another with the intent to wrongfully obtain, and here's where we got a list of things. Anything of value, any equittance, any advantage, or any immunity. Any of those constitutes an extortion. Class F felony, somewhat serious crime. Now we get to the heart of the matter. We get to the burglaries. Now, Remember, your book made a distinction between home invasion and burglary, and I guess you could say in North Carolina our first-degree burglary is home invasion, but let's take a look at the general rules here. The common law definition of burglary is you break into the dwelling of another at night to commit a felony. That has been changed. Now, generally burglary is defined today as unlawful entry to or staying in a building with the intent to commit a crime. Some states have retained where you commit it, like dwelling or at night. Some states have gotten rid of these. Well, that begs the question, what does North Carolina have? Okay, so here are our 4 charges I think that we should be aware of. First of all, there are 2 burglary charges. There's first-degree burglary, second-degree burglary. Then we have felony breaking or entering of a building, and then we have misdemeanor breaking or entering of a building. So let's take a look at these. These are the elements of first-degree burglary, and this is why I said it's pretty close to what your book talks about as home invasion. First-degree burglary in North Carolina, you break. Now, what is to break? To break in North Carolina is to make an opening. So technically, if a door was open and you walked in, that would be an entry, and I'm saying completely open, not unlocked. There's no door. Let's suppose there's just a door frame, and I walked into a building. Technically, that's not going to be a breaking. A breaking is a making of a hole. I don't care whether it's opening a window or opening a door. That's a breaking. Or, in the more extreme example, breaking a window or breaking a door. Second one, enter. Enter here to be satisfied means some part of your body must break the plane of the house. Now, if you think about the simplest house you could have, just one room, 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. So there's 6 sides to it. Entering means some part of your body went from the outside to the inside. I don't care whether your hand went through the window. I don't care whether your foot stepped into the door. Some part of your body. Doesn't even have to be your whole body in North Carolina. That's your enter. So you break and you enter. Third, without consent. Now, we're going to assume you don't get this by trickery. So you go in without permission to go in. And again, for first-degree burglary, the dwelling house or sleeping apartment. So it's got to be where somebody routinely sleeps. So this burglary will not be covered, first-degree burglary won't be covered by stores or things like that. It's got to be a house or something close to a house. Of another. Great. Well occupied. And that's going to be kind of critical for first and second degree burglary. But this means someone's home when you break in at night with the intent to commit any felony or larceny therein. Okay, we have to distinguish here because lots of students think, well, if I broke in to beat somebody up, it's not a burglary. Yes, it is. If you broke in to beat someone senseless, which would be assault inflicting serious injury or assault with intent to kill, or if you broke in to kill someone, it's a burglary as well. It's any felony, not just a theft. And let's go back one slide here. You'll notice it's Class D felony. So you're looking at, 5 years or so, depending, again, where your prior sentence level is. Here's second degree. Now, second degree is identical to this, except, and let me go back to first degree for a second, except that fourth one, the fifth one of it, excuse me, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth one, it doesn't have to be occupied. So, you break, you enter without consent the dwelling house or sleeping apartment of another at night with the intent to commit burglary or a felony therein. That would make it second degree. Now, the other thing is, it just doesn't cover dwelling house or sleeping apartment. It's going to cover the whole curtilage. It's going to cover areas inside the curtilage. Now, curtilage is a term that lawyers use to refer to the area immediately around the house. So if you had a detached garage and you broke in, it could be second-degree burglary. If you had a wood shop out back, that could be part of the curtilage. Now, if you had a barn a mile down the road, that's not part of the curtilage. Breaking and entering offenses. We have the felony breaking and entering and misdemeanor breaking and entering. this covers any building. You still need to commit a felony or larceny therein. If you broke in, however, you broke into any building and you had no intent to commit a felony or larceny therein. Let's suppose it's a cold night. You're freezing to death. You see a house. You know it's not your house, but you break in just to get warm. It's not a felony. It's a crime. It's a misdemeanor. Unlawful entry is the part of entry. Okay. You do have to be a little bit careful about the unlawful, which would be close to breaking in North Carolina. Who has the right of entry? You also have to be concerned: is someone already in or remaining in the house? Enter, as I said here, means any part of it is enough. Staying behind after business closes is an unlawful entry. Using an instrument to break any one of the 6 sides, the floor, the ceiling, or the 4 walls, breaking the plane, as we say, is an entry. Dwelling house, as I said, very common. You can't rob your own house. It's yours because you have the right to enter. You can have instances where people might own something but not be allowed to enter it. For example, if I had rented out an apartment to someone and there was a lease and they had sole possession of the apartment and I just used my key to get in just to look around or to steal stuff, that could be a burglary because it wouldn't be an ownership issue, it would be a possession issue. The intent. Part of the elements of burglary, as I said, is the intent to commit a crime. Some states are going to require that you steal, that you prove. Other states that you just commit a crime. Some states will specify which crimes, not North Carolina, any felony. This is something that is, there's some issue where, let's suppose you catch someone in someone's house and the police say, what were you doing there? And maybe he was there to rob it, maybe he was there to get warm. He's got to have a good excuse to be in the house. If he doesn't, it's not like there is a presumption he's a thief, but it becomes a reasonable inference. Okay, so we've got a couple things coming up here. Much of the stuff that gets stolen is being stolen to be sold. And some of this, for example, has to do with drugs. Drugs are relatively expensive. So some people who need the money to buy drugs will commit a crime to get goods to sell. Now, the vicious thing about this, of course, is, if you bought a brand new TV for $1,000, I suppose it's a great TV, and I break into your house and steal it, when I go to sell it as a thief, fencing the goods, as it said, I'm not going to get $1,000 for it. I'll be lucky to get $100, 10 cents on the dollar. So when I go turn around to buy drugs, if you think about how truly cheap it is to grow marijuana, it's essentially a weed. But how expensive when marijuana is legal is. It might be 10 times more than the, quote, natural level of marijuana is. The end result is you have to commit more crimes to feed drug habits when drugs are illegal. It's one of the arguments people make, and it's not necessarily a good argument, but it's one you should be aware of, to legalize drugs. If you legalize drugs, you'll lower prices. When you lower prices, people have less of a need to steal to buy those drugs. So part of crime is driven by the expense of buying the drugs. Okay. So when you steal something, you have to convert it to cash because drug dealers typically don't want a TV. So what you have to do is you have to go to someone, give them the TV, and they will give you money. The person who gets the goods is receiving them. Now, if you think about it, the police aren't very often going to be there at that exact instant when the theft, the person who stole it, the thief, gives it to the fence. So most of the time when the police show up, if they do find there are stolen goods on the premises, they're going to have someone who possesses them or conceals them, but we don't know how they got them. So there's really two charges here. Did you receive the goods, or are you just possessing these goods? So North Carolina has felony and misdemeanor receiving of stolen goods. It has felony and misdemeanor possession of stolen goods. If stealing the good was a felony, if what you stole was very valuable, remember in North Carolina, for example, there's a $1,000 limit. If it's above $1,000, it's a felony. If you steal a horse, a swine, a dog, it's a felony. We don't see receiving charged very much because, like I said, the police don't tend to catch people in the act of receiving it. They do tend to arrest people that have possession of stolen goods. Now, there can be a good reason. Let's suppose your son came home and he had committed a crime. He had stolen a car or stolen a purse. And you saw it and you took it away from him. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. You took it away. You put it in your safe and you said, tomorrow we're going to return this to the person who it belongs to. And between then, the police come. And you say, well, yes, I have it. I was safeguarding it. I took it from my son. I was intending to give it back tomorrow. That could be a reasonable excuse for the possession. You might get charged, but you could raise it as a defense. But if you've got 10 stolen TVs in the back, you can't say, yeah, I was just collecting them until I got around to finding the rightful owners. So it's easier to prove that you possess stolen goods and that you know you possess stolen goods than it is to prove you received them. And you can't be willfully blind. If someone sells you a 72-inch TV for $10 and it's brand new and it's still in the box and it works, you can pretty much bet it's stolen. Nobody goes around selling a 72-inch TV for $10. Okay. Another crime we have, and this is in North Carolina as well, possession of burglar tools. The defendant has a device or implement in his possession that was capable of using in committing a burglary, and the defendant intend to use it. It can be difficult to prove. North Carolina's possession of burglar tools, which is a Class I felony, you are found in the possession of any of the following: a lockpick, a key, a bit, or other implement of housebreaking without lawful excuse. Now, if you're a locksmith, we expect you to have these things. It's not wrong that you have them. So, you wouldn't be charged. But if I catch you at 2 in the morning with a Slim or Jimmy or a lockpick outside someone else's house, you could potentially be charged here. I haven't seen this charged very often, but it's certainly possible. Destroying or damaging the property of another. Vandalism is one of those crimes. Typically, it's one of those crimes committed by adolescent boys, but it can be committed by others. Vandalism is a very serious problem. It can cost millions of dollars in cities. There have been laws passed to make parents responsible. Interestingly enough, in most cases, absent such laws, a parent is not responsible for the damage his child did. So now we have some concern about public. We have specific statutes about vandalism of churches, but we generally in North Carolina use injury to property. North Carolina General Statute 14-127, Class 1 misdemeanor. You willfully and wantonly. So if this was an accidental thing, if you were carrying a bucket of paint and you tripped and it fell against someone's property, it smeared on someone's house or their deck or something, then it's not a crime. You have to willfully and wantonly, which is an act that you intentionally do, damage, injures, or destroys the real property of another. So we're talking about houses, buildings, things like that. If the damage is over $200, it's a Class 1 misdemeanor. If the damage is under $200, it's a Class 2 misdemeanor. Criminal or defiant trespass. Criminal trespass occurs when someone enters the land of another or stays there, in which it's defiant. Defiant is when you unlawful enter after you've given notice and you refuse to leave. Entering or remaining in a building without intent to commit a crime cannot be burglary, but does constitute trespass. So if you're in my property and I tell you to leave, I might have invited you in the first place, but I say my invitation to you has been withdrawn and you do not leave, it's going to be a trespass. If the entry was unlawful, it can be criminal trespass, and we'll look at those in North Carolina. So North Carolina has really got 4, I think, that you should be aware of. First-degree trespass, second-degree trespass, domestic criminal trespass, and forcible trespass. So first-degree trespass, without authorization, you enter or remain on the premises that are enclosed or secured with the intent to keep out, or in a building of another. So if you were in my house, it could be a first-degree trespass, but let's suppose I had fenced my pool in, and you were inside the fence of the pool, and you weren't supposed to be there, or you're there and I ordered you out and you stayed, it would be first-degree trespass. Now, second-degree trespass, without authorization, you enter or remain on the premises of another after being told not to enter or remain by the owner, or if the premises are posted in a manner reasonably likely to come to the attention of a person who would enter. So let's talk about these 2 instances. Let's suppose I'm walking to the store and I cut across your property. And as I'm walking across, you say, hey, get off my property. I say, okay. And I walk off the property. No trespass occurred. But if I say, no, I'm walking to the store, and I continue to walk deeper into your property, right? Then it's a second-degree trespass. Now, sometimes people aren't home. So what can they do to protect their land? Well, they can put up signs. But, here's the thing. If the person who committed the trespass, if we had to prove that he saw it, this is going to come as a shock, but believe it or not, he'd probably lie. So if I said, didn't you see the no trespassing sign? And the other party, no, never saw it. So what North Carolina says, did you post it in a manner that would reasonably likely come to their attention? So typically, places where people would enter or exit the property, you don't have to put it every 5 feet, but areas where you typically would expect someone who was going to commit a trespass to see it. That's going to be enough in North Carolina. Now, domestic criminal trespass, this begins to get into issues of family law. After having been forbidden entry or ordered to leave by a lawful occupant, you enter or refuse to leave a premise occupied by your former spouse or someone you live with as a spouse while you're separated from them. So let's suppose I got in an argument with my wife. I left the house, I walked around the block, I cooled down, I started to come in, and she said, nope, you can't come in, I don't want you in the property. Well, I'm being forbidden entry if I've met the first condition. She is a lawful occupant. She's trying to stop me from entering. The premise is, however, occupied by someone who is my current spouse, not a former one, so you got an issue there, and we're not living apart. So living apart, generally you've established some type of second residence. Forcible trespass, you make an unpermitted or unlawful entry or refuse to leave by using force or threat of force or fear. The occupant is present and in peaceful possession of property. Now, as we conclude here, let me just say a few quick notes. There are a lot more crimes in every one of these chapters we could talk about. So when we talk about for example, trespass here, North Carolina has had statutes like breaking out of a building. North Carolina has had statutes like vandalism of a church, trespass on a church, all sorts of different things. So don't think that the examples I gave you are all inclusive, that now you can go out and practice criminal law, because trust me, even lawyers and policemen and judges can practice the law or enforcement or be a cop or be a judge for 10 or 20 years and still not know all the laws. All right, on that note, we've concluded Chapter 14. At this point, I imagine you all are getting ready to start studying for your final. If not, I advise you to. Good luck on that, and hopefully I will see you in class, another class sometime. Good night.